Hello again and welcome to our weekly look inside Syria. I'm James Bays. As President Assad's forces step up their battle with opposition rebels without much regard for civilian casualties, the number of people fleeing Syria has grown sharply in recent days. One neighbouring country, Jordan, says about 1,000 Syrians are crossing the border every day. In Turkey, which had said it wouldn't accept more than 100,000 refugees, officials have now revised that number to 120,000, and they're preparing contingency plans for even more. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees says the situation is precarious, with aid agencies struggling to prepare camps and distribute resources. And in a matter of weeks, the temperature will drop and the winter will make the situation even worse. From the Jordanian-Syrian border, our correspondent Jane Araf has this report.
Heavy fighting has driven Syrians out of their homes for months. But with opposition fighters now controlling more territory near the borders, thousands more Syrians have been able to leave. Turkey, Jordan, Iraq and Lebanon are struggling to cope. Tiny Jordan now has the biggest number of Syrian refugees and the fastest growing refugee camp. For these Syrians, this is the bleak destination of a dangerous and desperate journey. This is how you become a refugee. Just a few hours ago, these families were in Syria. The army picked them up on a winding mountain road just inside Jordan. Haifa came from Humps with her young daughters.
My husband was killed, and then they bombed our house. I decided I couldn't stay in Syria.
The Jordanian army gives them food, water, and the chance to rest before taking them to the overcrowded refugee camp. But this man wants more.
Tell them we want weapons. Don't just come and film us. Send weapons. The people are dying.
There are just a few hundred people here now, but more keep coming. This river is a natural border between Jordan and Syria. It's still early in the evening, but as the night goes on and it gets darker, the roads will be filled with hundreds of people making the journey from their broken country into exile. A lot of refugees are too afraid of Syrian security forces to travel in daylight. So they set out in the dark, going through back roads and farmland, some of them walking for days. In the last few hours, more than 900 people have crossed from this point into Jordan. Ahmed walked for days with his family to get here from Daraa. He says life at home had become impossible.
From 7:30 in the evening until the morning, we stay in the shelter, but they even bomb us in the shelters.
This young man from Daraa says as soon as his injured leg heals, he'll go back to fight alongside the opposition.
The Free Syrian Army picked us up and protected us along the whole road so the Assad regime wouldn't shoot at us.
Some leave their homes with only what they can cram into a plastic bag. The children are exhausted, the parents worried. They wait for this bus to take them to a camp in the desert, beginning their life as some of Syria's newest refugees. Jane Araf, Al Jazeera, at the Jordanian-Syrian border.
Now let's bring in our guests. In the Austrian capital, Vienna, we're joined by Melissa Fleming, chief spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. In Amman, Jordan, Adnan Hayajna, a professor of political science at the Hashemite University. Thank you both for joining us. Melissa, can I start with you? You now have an official figure of refugees, 235,000. How serious is the situation?
Oh, it's very serious. I mean, 100,000 of those number fled in the month of August alone. So the numbers have just spiraled, and these are people coming across in very, very vulnerable situations, some of them injured, all of them traumatized. Very, very difficult for the receiving countries to take such a huge sudden influx and accommodate them. So they're doing the best they can, but they need a lot of help.
Adnan, your country is the country that's seen the biggest rise. Tell me about the situation in Jordan and how worried you are.
Well, I think Jordan is doing the best. I think it's best in terms of helping the Syrian refugees. I think the estimate is about 500,000 Syrians have fled from Syria to Jordan. Most of them are living within the Jordanian cities and towns, and about 25,000 are living in a Zatari camp. Most of them are living in a very good conditions. I think there's a support for them in terms of health care and support of, I think, sending about 17,000 students to schools. I think we just started about a week ago. But in terms of the conditions, I think in the camps, they are not as perfect as they should be, because Jordan is under a lot of hardship, economic hardship and political hardship. And I think they need a lot of help in order to deliver the best services in order, I think, to preserve the human dignity for the Syrian people.
Melissa, can I ask you about what UNHCR has been doing? When I look at the figures released by UNHCR earlier in the year, you estimated 185,000 refugees. Already there are many more than that this year. Are you behind the curve on all this?
Well, maybe our official figures appear to be behind the curve, but certainly not our delivery. That's being revised, and it's going to be resubmitted in an overall UN budget to the international community in a couple of weeks' time. We have been communicating the numbers as they are in reality, and we've been fundraising along the way, week by week. So the numbers are bigger. As our guest said in Jordan, these are the registered numbers, but there are many, many more who have fled with, who may have friends and relatives or the means to stay in a hotel. But this soon could run out. In Jordan, for example, it's only been recent that a refugee camp was established. Most refugees, or all of them, were being hosted by families. And it went, though, to a breaking point, at which point a refugee camp had to be established.
Well,
in Lebanon, there is no refugee camp.
Should you have not done that earlier, and should your predictions have been based on the worst case scenarios? Why have your predictions always been behind what's been going on? Should you not have been ahead of all of this?
Well, as I said, the response has not fallen behind. The numbers may have not reflected the reality of the moment. Who wants to predict that a conflict is going to push so many thousands of people across the border so suddenly? It's very, very difficult to know. All I can say is UNHCR has 60 years of experience in responding quickly to huge refugee crises. So, you know, we know what we're doing. The numbers soon will reflect. What we're very concerned about, though, is actually people being hindered from fleeing. I mean, it's bad enough having to choose to become a refugee in order to survive. We're hearing a number of stories of, for example, in Jordan, that the numbers crossing are slowing down because the people trying to escape are being shot at or being hindered. In Lebanon, or people trying to flee to Lebanon, we're hearing stories that only women and only men are being let out, and the women and children are being held back. So very disturbing situation inside Syria itself. Of course, once the people get out, it may not be nice to be a refugee. It may not be the best, but at least they're safe.
Well, Melissa, you do say that you're keeping up with events, but the reason I'm giving you a hard time, and I know that the UNHCR does good work and has done plenty of good work over the years, is that I've been speaking to refugees in the last few weeks. I've been in Lebanon myself. People there are very unhappy with your response. They say you've not been doing enough and you've always been behind on all this.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the government in any country has to request UNHCR assistance. In Lebanon, we are assisting registered refugees. Those who are registered, we do provide assistance. It's probably not enough. We are stepping it up in any case. The people we know about, it's a little bit also more difficult to reach people who are staying with families, who are in cities and urban populations, than it is to know exactly. You have these number of refugees in a camp. All of them are registered. You know they are child, boy, girl, woman, man, injured, vulnerable, not. And these kinds of statistics and these kinds of profiles are extremely important in order to be able to deliver good assistance.
Melissa, we've mentioned the neighbouring countries. Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. The number of Syrian refugees fleeing for neighbouring countries has raised the alarm on a deepening humanitarian crisis. These are the official figures from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. A total number, 246,267 Syrians who've now fled their homeland. Let me break it down further. The UNHCR says more than 81,000 refugees are now in Jordan, including 33,142 awaiting registration. Another 78,500 people have fled to Turkey. UNHCR says all of them are now registered and assisted. There are around 64,636 refugees in Lebanon, including 18,459 awaiting registration. Around 21,744 refugees crossed into Iraq. 1,841 of them are still awaiting registration. Let's be joined by another guest on our discussion here, who's joining us from one of the places where all the refugees are gathered. That's Wissam Tarif, who is Avaz's Arab World campaigner. Avaz is a global online civic organisation that promotes activism on world issues with almost 16 million members. Wissam, if I can ask you, we've heard those official UNHCR figures. We've heard Melissa from the UNHCR saying that those don't amount to the real figures. Where you are in Lebanon, what do you think the real figure of refugees is right now?
It's at least double. Lots of the people in Lebanon are not registered. The UNHCR has been behind in many places on statistics, on registering the number of people, the refugees who arrived to Lebanon, for multi-set of reasons. But the number in Lebanon is at least the double number that UNHCR has as a registered number.
And Wissam, Melissa has been telling us that UNHCR has been there with the response, though, helping those people. Is that what the people on the ground are telling you? Because I was where you are in the Bekaa Valley in the last couple of weeks, and people seemed very unhappy with the response they were getting, both from the UN and from the Lebanese government.
I think everyone, including the UNHCR, was very much aware that this is going to turn into a humanitarian crisis. Everyone expected tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to flee Syria to the neighboring countries. The UNHCR planning came too late. They started later than they should have started, and that is affecting the refugees, the quality of life that these people are having. In Lebanon, for instance, we have hundreds of families staying at schools. Schools are about to start in Lebanon. There is no housing planning. The Lebanese government did not allow the UNHCR to establish a camp. The UNHCR does not have enough statistics or location or planning to establish a camp in Lebanon. In 1 week time from now, we will have lots of people simply in the streets because there is no place for them to stay and there is no contingency plan. I don't think the UNHCR or anyone else, and in particular the Friends of Syria, have been doing a very good job in receiving the refugees. Everyone is behind. There wasn't a very clear political will, no contingency plan, and we are 17 months in this conflict. We still don't have a clear statistics, and there is no clear contingency plan. Whether in Lebanon, I think in Turkey the situation is a little bit better, but when it comes to schooling, for example, it's a very similar problem because it happens that Syrian children don't speak Turkish. And the UNHCR so far does not have a contingency plan to contain the Syrian students inside these camps.
Melissa, some stinging criticism there of the UNHCR. I'd like your response to that, and yes, specifically on the school issue as well, because the clock really is ticking there to get these Syrian school children to school. And in Lebanon, I know myself, having been to some of the schools there are actually Syrian refugees living in the schools who are going to have to move out and have nowhere to go. Can you answer those points, please?
Absolutely. A few inaccuracies there. Maybe we should publicize our contingency planning a little more. Obviously, we have contingencies both for the schooling issue. We're also working with the government to identify alternative public buildings to move these people to in a dignified way. There is a deadline. The Lebanese kids need to start school, and these schools are being occupied by desperate families who have nowhere else to go. Obviously, we will do everything we can to ensure a smooth transition. Also, the Lebanese government took the decision that every Syrian child is welcome in Lebanese public schools. It's easier said than done. As Sam rightly said, these schools have a Lebanese curriculum. They teach in French, and that is obviously very difficult for children from Syria to adapt to.
And Melissa, speaking to those families, those Syrian families, they say the government may say they're welcome in the schools, but I've spoken to Syrian families who say they can't find anyone to go and register with, to register their children, to enroll their children in those schools.
Well, there is an information campaign going on. We're also identifying Syrian teachers, looking at if the schools are very full, afternoon programs whereby the Lebanese teachers together with Syrian refugee teachers would have an afternoon shift for the Syrian kids. We have to look at flexible ways. If there's room in the class, there will also be support and help for kids who need to be integrated into the Lebanese school system. There is planning for this. I really want to emphasize, of course, it is not perfect. It's a race against time. As more and more people come, it's very difficult. However, we do have plans, and I think we are making progress.
Adnan, can I take it to Jordan and your experience of working with the UNHCR of your country? Are you happy with what they are doing and also with what the Jordanian government is doing?
I think the Jordanian government is trying to do the best, but I think it has its own limitation. I think a lot of people are talking about the Syrian refugees. I think we have to look at the grassroots of this, issue, the grassroots causes. I think the causes, I think the international community has to do its best in terms of getting a solution to the problem, to the original problem, to the Bashar al-Assad regime, then move to these auxiliary, issues, which is, very, very important. I think there are 2.5 million displaced persons in Syria. Some of them are moving, as you said in the program, to neighboring countries. But I think most of the people are talking about how bad the situation is. But nobody is doing, I think, a lot of help in terms of helping the Syrian people, in terms of, especially the free world. And I think the international community, the international actors have to walk the talk. And I think they have to deliver in terms of, supporting these hosting countries, in terms of money, in terms of programs. And I think the winter is approaching. There's so many problems. There is a call by the Jordanian government, I think, for an international conference for the Syrian refugees. And I think we had a lot of experience here in Jordan in terms of hosting many refugees since, I think, the start of this country many decades ago. So
yes, but Adnan, you mentioned that, and you hosted, for example, very many Iraqi refugees. They weren't locked up in a camp. These people say they feel like prisoners. Some say they're being treated like animals. Why are the Syrians in Jordan not allowed to move freely, and why do they have such bad conditions?
Well, I think a lot of people are treated, I think, very well. And I think the Zatari camp, there are many Jordanians living near the camp. And I think if this is good for the Jordanians, I think should be accepted by the Syrians. It's not a perfect situation. I think there are only 30,000 people living there. 81,000, I think, the numbers who are registered with the UNHCR. But I think more than 250,000 living within the towns, and they're getting jobs in the private sector, and they're getting support from NGOs. But I think the cost of hosting the Syrian refugees, estimated by the government, is about $700 million. And nobody has given Jordan, I think, only small portion of that money, and I think we cannot. I think the government cannot continue to do that. And I heard the press conference by the military spokesperson about 2 days ago, and I think many resources by the military, the Jordanian military, are taken from the Jordanian military into helping the Syrian refugees. About $250 million. This is a lot of money, taken into consideration that Jordan has a lot of political unrest. People have a high level of unemployment, have so many political, problems, political unrest. We have a proposed election where people are boycotting, and we have our plate, the government plate is so full. I think we have a full agenda, and we cannot deal with it by ourselves. And I think
Adnan, I get that point, but the Lebanese government makes exactly the same point, Wissam, and yet the response is completely different. One country is putting all their refugees in a camp, the other is not letting anyone build any tents at all. Which do you think is right, Wissam?
No one wants to live in a camp, I think, and people don't want to live in tents. In Lebanon, they didn't allow the establishment of a camp. The Lebanese society received a lot of people in their homes. They opened schools, people took shelter in schools, but that solution is not sustainable, because what would happen when the violence increased in Damascus? When the violence increased during 1 week, 30,000 people entered to Lebanon from Damascus and Damascus suburbs. And the main issue was housing. I don't think the situation in Lebanon can continue like this. The country will receive more refugees, and when that happens, there has to be a contingency plan. They have to provide housing, and there is no alternative. Perhaps the weather conditions up in the mountain in Bekaa in the winter are too tough to establish tents, camps, but perhaps small housing units to contain the refugees, it would be a good solution. But so far, the Lebanese government has not said it clearly that they would allow the establishment of such a camp inside Lebanon.
Melissa, if I can raise with you the fact that it's not just Syrians we're talking about. There are Iraqis who are already refugees in their own country. Many of them have now returned to Iraq because of the bad situation in Syria. There are also Palestinians. For historical reasons, they seem to be treated even worse than anyone else. The Palestinians I met in Lebanon, they're not treated as refugees. They're only allowed to come in for a maximum of 2 weeks, and then they have to pay a fine of some $37 per person, which these people who've left the country with none of their belongings can afford. I know even the UN doesn't treat the Palestinians the same as everyone else. Your comment?
Well, first of all, there is a separate UN organization. It's called UNRWA.
That's the point I'm making. You treat them differently.
No, this is historic. They have their own exclusive organization that is caring for
Melissa, this isn't about people fleeing in 1948. This is people fleeing a war right now, fleeing the same bombs and bullets. Why on earth should the UN treat them differently? And do you think they're being treated well?
The UN does not treat them differently. The UN is advocating, UNHCR, the UN, UNRWA, we're all one family. We're advocating for protection of all people forced to flee Syria, including people inside Syria, particularly refugees, Iraqis, Palestinians, Somalis, Sudanese, who for many years sought sanctuary and received a tremendous amount of safety, sanctuary, goodwill inside Syria to prevent a big outflow of these people, given the historic difficulties. In Iraq, things are easier. People are returning. Iraqis are returning. 30,000 Iraqis have already returned to Iraq in the past months. They tell us, maybe prematurely, they may not have been ready to go, but their government is receiving them. UNHCR offices in Iraq are helping them and aiding them to restart their new lives. Of course, for Palestinians, it's a much different situation, and we are advocating, absolutely, all of us in the UN, for their protection and their safety. And for UNRWA, the organization bureaucratically that is set up to support them, to be financially supported so that they can properly aid Palestinians who are forced to flee.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks to all our guests for joining us today, Melissa Fleming, Adnan Hayashna and Wissam Tarif. And thanks to you too for being with us. Al Jazeera aims to have the most comprehensive coverage of the situation in Syria in our news bulletins around the clock and on our website, aljazeera.com, where we have stories, background and analysis from our teams in Syria and across the region. From everyone here, I'm James Bays. I'll see you soon.